Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business podcast. I am your host, Catryn Becker. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Frank Iglesias today. He is the owner of Working with Houses. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thank you, Karen. Pleasure to be here today.
We are so pleased to have you. So tell me a little bit more about what does Working with Houses do? What is that? What should people know about you?
So we started in the world of real estate investment. I transitioned from an IT professional, both in the corporate and consulting space, into real estate. And so when we came up with the name, it sort of was, and I didn't actually come up with it. My business partner did. We were like, okay, we need to form an LLC because that's what we're supposed to do. It's like, we need a name. And she's like, Working with Houses, because that's what we do. So we're like, okay, we'll go with it. And that was it. And we just never got around to changing it.
Well, it's so clear. It's
so,
perfect.
so I mean, yeah, so we left it. We're like, I don't know if it's the best branding idea, but it's clear what we do. And amazingly enough, we actually have had people ask, well, what do you do when you work with houses? But that's those super technical people that ask that. But we invest in real estate. So we buy either to rent, we do the fix and flips, we do new construction as well. So we've played in all of those facets. With rentals, it's been your traditional tenant as well as your short-term people that do Verbo, Airbnb, that sort of thing. And then we also have a retail arm where when we realized that when we sell properties that we flipped, like your end buyer Dave were like, what's Working with Houses? They're just trying to buy a house to live in. So we actually came up with a separate brand called Skywalk Homes, which sounds much more appealing to your home buyer that's looking to move in. So when people say, hey, who did the work? We'll say, go to skywalkhomes.com. They're the builder, they're the remodeler, whatever.
Oh, very, very interesting. So
Mhm.
I would love to know more about what the process was, what the journey was for you to actually what was your thought process, the decision making going from an IT consulting career into real estate?
So that was an interesting journey because when we left, first of all, we left IT because we were bored. And
Mm.
I say we, really it was me. I guess you could say by extension, some of my family members that had helped me with, getting better at IT stuff. But really, I was ultimately bored. I worked at a great company with amazing people, amazing team. I mean, one of my teammates was a college roommate. Can't ask for more than that. And I mean, but there was very good team. It was great pay, great benefits. Everything was great. And I was bored. And so I knew I had to change. It's like everything is perfect and I'm bored. Obviously, something had to change. We had already started investing in real estate just kind of on the side, just buying like rental property. And so when we left, I have to admit it was not well planned out because I didn't leave thinking, let's go to the next thing. I left because I was like, I'm bored, so let me just give more time to this.
Mm.
So when I left IT, those first few months were like, okay,
Now
there's
what?
no regular check coming in. Exactly. Now what? What do you do? And so I was not really properly prepared. And at that point in time, I'd not even heard hardly about coaching. I think I'd maybe heard of it once or twice at that point, and it was very expensive. So naturally at that point, you don't really know. You know, think you needed it. You just really didn't know what you didn't know.
So
And
true.
so the first couple of years of that was very adventurous. A lot of roller coasters, just trying to find our way. And I mean, we had success. We got business done, but it was a lot of curves, a lot of curves.
So knowing what you know now, what would you have told Frank in IT who was bored? Like, what would you say to your past self?
I would have said, make sure you got solid reserves. And we had decent reserves. I mean, we weren't in bad shape, but I would have shored that up maybe a little bit more. I would have said, get a coach and don't ever not have one
Hmm.
for the entire journey.
What do
That
you
would be
think?
the two big things.
I think those are great advice. And, I had a similar experience being in engineering and being bored and wanting to learn and do something else. And that's how I ended up doing this. So I can completely relate to that. And same thing,
Mhm.
great people, great pay, everything was great. And it's like, why am I not happy? you know, what
Exactly.
what is this? So I completely can relate to that. And I think many people can. A lot of people who have been on the show already have, experienced that same journey of how they went from the corporate to the entrepreneurial side. So I think it's something that's um it's a much bigger situation that people experience than we really talk about. We feel like we're kind of alone in that. And I
Mhm.
know for me, it was kind of something like, well, I almost feel like greedy or selfish to want to be happy in addition to having all these other great things.
And interesting you say that because I have felt that before where I don't know, it's like when you're an entrepreneur, it's almost like if you have a bunch of success, you get around certain people and you almost feel guilty.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for it, but it's just because you realize, well, you're doing what they probably wish they would be doing, or at least maybe not necessarily doing what you're doing, but have the boldness to take a chance on themselves.
Because there's a risk aspect to it.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
huge thing, and
Oh, for
not
sure.
everyone is that willing to take those risks. And that's okay.
Sure thing. Absolutely. It's not
Yeah.
for everybody. That's for certain.
It's not for everyone, and it's okay. Uh I was also similar in that I'd never heard of coaching. I don't think it's something that's really, or at least hadn't been talked about in the corporate world the same way. I mean, um, like networking wasn't really something I was familiar with. Like, we met people by going to like conferences and that kind of stuff. So I imagine it was probably similar for you. What do you think people's kind of, why do you think people are so hung up with starting to get coaching?
I think it's twofold. So I guess I have two thoughts on that. It seems to me, from my personal experience with myself and a lot of people in the real estate space that I've worked with, they tend to avoid coaching. Cost is usually the big one, stares away. The problem is with real estate is become so accessible. Like anybody can just decide one day, I'm just gonna go buy a house, fix it, and I'll go to Home Depot and Lowe's, and you see the TV shows. So I think a lot of it's been commoditized. So it seems so easy. So I don't need a coach. I mean, how hard could it be to fix this or to fix that or to paint a wall or to move this and whatever it might be. And so I've seen a lot of people go into it with a very an attitude of underestimating, many times significantly underestimating what it really takes to put a quality product together.
Sure.
Regardless of whether you're going to keep it or sell, it doesn't matter. So I see a lot of that. And so then they realize a coach would be helpful, but by then now they're underwater in the project. So now there is no money to go hire the coach. So it's kind of a, it's kind of a self. I'm not sure what the right phrase is, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is you're in the hole, and now what do you do?
Right.
And then you mix that with YouTube, where YouTube has picked up a lot of steam in real estate, in particular over the last, I'd say, 7 or 8 years. You've seen a ton of YouTube education. So you all always people saying, okay, yeah, you can learn everything about real estate over YouTube. But the reality is now there's so much. It's like, well, how do you know who's right? How do you know
Mm.
who you should be following? And if you don't know, then what you do is you tend to default to who gives you the answer you want to hear.
Yes, confirmation bias.
Yes. So you go to that, and so then that becomes your education, except that only has limited success as well, if any at all. And there's you know, so that's a challenge. So I think between those two things, you've commoditized it, you got a lot of free education, and then the last piece I'd say is you have a lot of people that want to coach real estate, they want to teach it, and there's a lot of gurus with courses, and so they make it easy. to give away free stuff. And so everybody for the longest time was giving away free this, free ebook, free this, but it was positioned in a way where everything was always saying real estate's easy, real estate's easy, real estate's easy. And at the end of the day, there is ease to real estate, but there's also a lot of difficulty that goes into it as
Sure.
well.
But that doesn't necessarily sell when someone's trying to sell their product, right?
Exactly. It's amazing how all the courses don't really talk about what happens. I always thought, what if I start a TV show that says, flipping Atlanta or whatever, because that's where we live, what really happens? I was like, yeah. I don't know that show will get much traction because I'll be like, no, let me show you what really happened. The anti-HGTV now.
It might, because people love to watch a train wreck. So
yeah, I said, yeah. I mean, I can illustrate a train wreck because some of these houses that we've done are train wrecks by default.
Yeah.
And they're very difficult projects. By the way, I have nothing against HGTV, but I've always thought you have all these shows that illustrate the beautiful side of the business.
Sure.
Which might account for 5% of what really happens.
Right. And even when they add in like that sort of, dramatized for TV sort of situations where then it's like, oh, what's going to happen? Cut to commercial break. And then they come back and it was not really a big deal.
Yeah. No, a bigger deal is like this morning, I get a phone call from a contractor and he's, they're putting recessed lights in the house and the connection is the wrong connection. But he's got to put like 50 light fixtures up in the next 6 hours. So he doesn't have time to run the store. And now we got to get someone to go exchange them. So I got to call my site manager to go do this. So I basically shoot him a text saying, I'm on a podcast. You got to handle it. Have a nice day. That's what I pay you for anyway.
Thank you for prioritizing being here. I'm so
well, that's what I pay. That's what I pay him for. So I'm like, here's the issue, resolve it, because that's what he's there for. But sometimes the subcontractors will come to me because they've known me longer. And so that's another challenge is when you bring in other people to help manage projects, but you're using subcontractors that have known you for longer, they want to default to you because they know you. So you're trying to add someone into the relationship, but initially to a subcontractor, it feels more like a third party wheel.
Sure.
So there's a balancing that gradually, saying it's okay to trust this person. It's okay to trust this person.
So earlier you mentioned YouTube, and one of the things that I think you do really well is you do all of the social media really well. And no offense, but you're not a spring chicken, right? I'm not either.
No.
But you do it really well where you're on TikTok, you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook, like you're constantly being there and having that sort of consistent showing up. How was that for you? Did you feel any sort of resistance into doing that? Or do you think maybe your IT background made you more open to these kind of technologies?
So I was blessed in that probably in 2011 or 12, I don't know, I was a much younger investor back then. I got to speak in front of a room as a panelist for Equity Trust Company, which is a self-directed IRA custodian. And it was a panel about newer investors. And for whatever reason, they asked me to be on this panel. And so what was significant about that was a room of 1,000 people at the time, more or less, big ballroom hotel in Orlando. And so that experience got me over the idea of putting video out real quick. Because after that, anytime I would speak at a meeting, it seemed tiny by comparison. So it's the idea of just dive right in the ocean and figure out how to swim kind of thing. And so then we started running our own meetings locally in Atlanta at the suggestion of another guru, for lack of a better term, that had come to do an event in Atlanta. And so I started doing it. He's like, someone should start a local group here in Atlanta. So I was like, sure. So I just did it. Didn't really think it through or anything. We just did it, acted. But I became very comfortable just speaking in front of people, so that when it came time to start doing more and more, by then Facebook was out. And so we're already used to posting, but we didn't really post video. But then when we started getting into YouTube, and now we're getting to Instagram and now TikTok, it's just it's very natural to talk. So for us, the challenge is, okay, how to create content that is hopefully meaningful in a very short amount of time.
That's the
And
challenge.
that is the challenge, just because I like to talk, I like to educate, I like to teach, because I also spent 15 years teaching music on the side. So
Really?
I'm used to educating. When I did IT, I actually taught music for 15 years on the side. Because when I went to college, I was actually a music major.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm a trained musician by,
What's
from
your
my high school days.
instrument?
Percussion.
Okay.
Yeah, so not just drum set, but all the percussive instruments, whether it's mallet percussion, hand percussion, and those sorts of things. So,
My sister played the marimba in high school
oh
band.
yes, love that instrument. Spent an amazing number of hours playing it. And
Yeah,
once I
it
left
was fun
college,
listening.
but once you leave college, you're like, what am I going to do with that? So,
You mean you don't carry around a giant marimba with you everywhere?
every now and then I look, and every year at Christmas time, I'm like, all right, is this the year we spend a bunch of money on a marimba? We're like, nope. You look at the price tag, you're like, that's probably never going to happen realistically, but maybe it will, maybe 20 years from now or something.
I hope everyone
But
listening goes and looks up what a marimba is now.
yeah, yeah. Well, and if you buy a really nice 5-octave one, they run 15 to $25,000.
No
So
way.
yeah, so I mean, so to buy one today would be like total personal recreational toy. And
That's
they're such
insane.
beautiful instruments that it's not like you're going to put them in your truck and move it. Like you
Yeah.
have to really protect them. They're made for concert halls. At the end of the day, that's what they're made for.
Yeah.
No different than buying a beautiful Steinway piano would be.
Yeah, where it's a centerpiece to the room.
Exactly. That's really what it is. And it's a beautiful instrument, but realistically, yeah. I'm not sure how we
Anyway,
got
we
into
got
that.
so off.
However, but oh yeah, the social media thing. So effectively, and so from teaching all those years, from speaking, starting a meeting, being thrown on a stage at equity with equity, and I've always been comfortable speaking in a group setting, just from a purely educational standpoint. And so, because that's just what we did.
Yeah.
And so the trick has been to learn how to do it in a succinct manner that's hopefully effective. I feel like we're still infants at trying to figure it out, in particular TikTok, because as I tell my assistant, I open up TikTok and it's always some form of music that I don't like. So I'm always like, when is somebody gonna put like Metallica or Rush or something on here? So, but it's okay. I realize that whatever the platform needs, that's what we'll do, because it's not about my taste. It's about how's this going to serve the audience.
Sure.
And so we're learning that. And so I hired, and that's the thing I did was this year I hired an assistant to help us just be great at executing on marketing. And one of those aspects is social media, so that our reach can get out. And because I've met a ton of people, but we've never really been able to truly leverage using social media as a way to take that reach and extend out farther. So that's something we're committed to right now.
How was that process in hiring someone? Because, I know from my experience from other people that I've spoken with, that I've interviewed on here, that it can be quite a mental block in how company, especially, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs expand their business. There's some sort of mental block there of, will I have enough money to pay this person? Is that anything that you experienced?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's always a concern is if you hire someone are they going to earn their worth, and hopefully not just earn their worth, but do better than that so that you make more money, they make more money, everybody wins. But what I've learned is and I can't take credit for this phrase. It was one of the guys that's helped me in real estate. He always said, hire for drive.
Mm.
Don't hire the skills, hire for drive. Is the person are they a driven person? Because who could teach any skill?
Especially you're a teacher.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm comfortable too. I can teach people to do things, and I can teach people how to teach themselves.
Mm.
but you can't teach drive, or maybe you can, but if you can, it's, because it's such a subjective thing, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because it would really be more like, how do I illustrate to someone what it means to be driven? That's to me at least, it's very subjective, because drive looks different for different people.
Oh, absolutely.
So
So
we look.
what did you look for when you were looking for drive, for ambition?
So great question. I looked for somebody that came in, first of all, they had presence. Okay, they looked like present. They showed sincere interest, like they really wanted to do something that was um, contributing both to themselves as well as the company, so a mutual benefit. Somebody that was really interested in learning. There's what I found when I interview people is a lot of people are interested in learning about how much you're going to get paid.
Hmm.
but I'm not looking. I already know that. I don't need anyone's help to tell me that. I want to know, are they sincerely interested in learning so that they can grow as a person? And you have to be driven to do that.
Yeah.
I think we all know people from that, maybe from corporate world, where it kind of, it's the old, what's the old analogy, the time clock mentality.
Mm-hmm.
They just come in, they play, and when 5 o'clock is done, they're done, they turn it off, and that's okay. But
Or like that song from the 80s, everybody's working for the weekend.
yes, yes. And in our world, as you know, entrepreneurs, you don't work for the weekend. They're weekends, but sometimes the weekends are working.
Yep.
But then maybe one day during the week is a lighter day, because we're looking for opportunity, not 9 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 5. So ultimately, I'm looking for people that are just driven, where they understand the goal is bigger than just hours in a day.
Hmm.
That it's a mission. It's not a job. It's a mission. And so one of the things, so as I was looking for someone to help with marketing, first of all, I was always amazed at how many people apply, because when they would apply, the first thing I would do was, well, let me go see what marketing they're doing now.
Yeah. How do they market themselves?
Right. And so everyone proclaimed themselves as an expert, and you look at what they did and you're like, no. And you would see it didn't work for whatever reason. And so what I would do is I just do a quick call. I don't do in person. I just a quick call and figure out in 15, 20 minutes, does this even make sense to meet with them? And the answer is usually no. So a quick phone screen would handle it. And then based on the phone screen, we would determine who to meet in person. So then when I go to meet them in person, now I will take quality time to get to know them and who they are and what makes them tick, because that's what I really need. We'll teach them the skills, we'll provide them the training, but we need to know that they're a great person first.
Absolutely. So I've noticed in your background that there are some beautiful family photos. So obviously
Yeah.
family is something that's important to you. Um, I know from my experience that how I sacrificed my time with my family, or just any sort of sacrifice in corporate, is different than what I've had to sacrifice as an entrepreneur. Has that been similar to you? And what sort of sacrifices have you had to face?
Yeah, I think the biggest sacrifice, well, first of all, the biggest sacrifice is the quote unquote security of a regular paycheck. That's my family's been pretty used to that now, though it's been a decade, so they're used to that. So, but initially, that was a concern. That was probably the first big sacrifice, is there is no every 2 weeks on Friday, here comes a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first one. After that, it really wasn't, usually it's just long hours. That's the big one, because as you're building the business, there's a lot of things where we didn't know, where we didn't know what we didn't know. Again, that's why I go back to, had I had coaching back in the beginning, I would have accelerated this so much more. So you're doing things, and you're hoping the people you're talking to are the right people to help get you to the next level. And that wasn't always the case. So sometimes people give advice and they're not trying to be mean, but you realize it wasn't the right person to be listening to.
Mm,
And so, you end up making mistakes. Um, so there was, so the sacrifice there is obviously the time to fix mistakes. So there was a lot of that. Fortunately, as the first, particular the earlier years of being an entrepreneur, my kids were younger and I didn't have to miss much of what they did. So that was something I was really happy about. I didn't miss a lot of kid stuff. I got to be around a lot of it.
oh, that's
Uh,
beautiful.
yeah, so that worked out pretty good. Did I miss a little? I did here and there, but thankfully it wasn't a lot. And my wife homeschooled our children, so that helped a lot too. So they were around more anyway in
Sure.
general.
More flexibility.
Yeah, so there was more flexibility there. Maybe the biggest sacrifice of all, though, was really just because they were homeschooled, because we worked from home, is learning how to disconnect business from family.
Mm,
That one's harder because then if you had a bad day, you take the stress into the household, not because you're trying to, but because,
you're
and you
already in the household.
you're already in the household and so my wife picks up on it, the kids pick up on it. And so, that I think that's the toughest part of it was just when when you're in a great mood, they feel it. But if you're not in a great mood, even if you turn it off, they still feel it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
know because they know dad. They know my wife knows her husband.
Isn't it amazing how we can feel those kind of emotions from other people, even if, we think we're trying to hide it?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I would even say as I've become more cognizant of it, you realize more and more how not good people are at hiding it. Like it becomes more and more. If you're looking, it's like anything else. If you seek it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
So if I consciously go into conversations trying to read people, I find that I get better and better and better at it.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful. Well, before we wrap up, I would love if you would share what do you feel is the best piece of advice that you've received that has helped you?
personal or professional?
Whichever one, because as we've just discussed, there's a lot of overlap.
There's a lot of well, on the professional side, it's easy. Get the right coaches. And if someone's not helping you get the results you need. And this assumes, of course, you're doing what you're being told to do, which is a very important part of coaching. Um, then get the right person. But obviously, and who my coach is, JT Fox. That's we have the best coaching.
We
Like
have the best coach,
I
hands
cannot
down.
imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine a better coach. I just can't even imagine it. But so we're grateful to him, and so it really working with him really raised the bar on what a coach can really bring to the table, especially as succinctly as he does it. So all credit to him for sure. So just having the right coach is just such a huge difference. So that's on the professional side. On the personal side, to me, faith is important.
Mm,
I'm a man of faith. I think that's real important. We believe in God. We believe that there's something bigger than us here, and that has certainly helped carry me. That has certainly helped. Um, I've had to learn to use it as a tool to build myself up. Just sometimes it can become an excuse. And so I've had to be careful. It's like, well, I don't know how this is working, so I'll just have faith it'll work out. Well, yeah, you do that, but you gotta keep taking action. You don't just sit back. And
right.
I think sometimes, and I don't like the word religion. Just to me, it's not about being religious. It's about having faith in a belief system that not only empowers you, but it's also in something larger than ourselves. And that really, there's a lot of comfort that comes from that. And there's a lot of strength that comes from that. So,
I agree 100%.
yeah.
Very, very similar to my personal beliefs as well.
Yeah. So having in business, we're calling it a coach, but in the personal life, it's more like that spiritual mentor. And so the best example isn't really me, it's my wife. So she had a lady that she was kind of a spiritual mentor for her. And she was just, I mean, and my wife is an extremely strong woman. And I'm like, there's no doubt that having that mentorship from this particular lady certainly helped mold her into who she is. So then I got smart. Sometimes the guys were a little bit behind schedule. I
You
said,
heard it
why
here
don't I go?
first. Breaking news.
I was like, yeah, I was like, why don't I go see her, my wife's mentor's husband?
Oh, nice.
So I chatted with him. This was probably about a month or two ago. I had a great conversation, and I was just talking to him about just personal growth things, and it was just a very natural conversation um, of things to improve on, and it was just great. It was great.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm so glad, Frank. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. Well, thank you so
Mhm.
much for your time here. I will put all of your contact information and social media tags in the description for this podcast. But if anyone wants to go and look at it ahead of time, all you have to Google is working with houses, and all of Frank's information will pop up.
Perfect, perfect.
Well, thanks so much, Frank. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you at the next JT Fox event.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time, everyone.